also have been looking very much forward to Audrey's speak. You really can't rush alcoholics.
You really can't. They work at their own pace.
Yeah.
That's how we do it.
Okay, then we will do the same.
We will do the same. I finally got my mic.
I'm a bit sad because this will be the last time I'll give you the word today.
Aww.
But nevertheless, I will do it. It's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been a fantastic host, keeping us on track. It is the last little bit of our day today, and Margareta and I have been talking back and forth throughout the day about how fun it's been to come out here and meet with all you guys and talk about the big book, talk about the program, and get excited with folks learning about the 12 steps. And that's the coolest thing ever. There's something to be said about what Bill refers to as a language of the heart. You know, I landed in the airport delirious and crazy living the other day, and I really did. And life came to pick me up, and you know, on the car ride over or back here, I said to him, I said, you know, it's funny that I don't know you, but I know you, right? That there's something about what happens to us when we recover from the depths of alcoholism, and our spirit is taken over with this work, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen. That I can walk into this room, I don't know any of you, but I know you. And I love that. I can go to meetings all over the U.S., really anywhere, and walk into the room, and there's a commonality that can't be broken. And Alcoholics Anonymous has given that to me as a direct result of the program, so I'm real grateful for that. 10 years ago, I was not real grateful for that at all, on any level, didn't care about any of that. I grew up in a small town in East Texas, out in the country, and I grew up with an alcoholic father, so I had some knowledge about AA, but it was misinformation that he had received, and then I had sort of picked up on. So when it was time for me to get sober, I didn't immediately think AA is the solution. That's obviously where I should go. It didn't even begin to dawn on me. I realized that my father had a drinking problem when I was 6. And I would have to help put him to bed, or he would try to put me to bed and stumble, and fall. And God love him, trying to pull those covers up to my neck and kiss me goodnight. And he'd fall on the bed, and I'd have to push him up and help him. And at 6, I learned real early on that whatever he was doing was a real bad thing, because my mother left and took me with her. And so I got the message very, very early on that alcohol was bad. And so I was pretty nervous about alcohol growing up. I watched my dad lose his family, his career, his health, and sort of watched him drink those things away. And so I never had any intentions of drinking. I don't know if you guys did this, but when I was very, very young, I kept a journal. And it was the child version of a journal where it wasn't just blank pages, it was questions. And you would fill it in. Who do you want to marry? What do you want to be when you grow up? And, silly little fun things like that. Where do you want to live? Do you want to have pets? And when it asked the question, what do you want to be? I wrote, not an alcoholic. I shouldn't even know what that word means, but I knew what that word meant very early on. And I remember at one point taking a drink of my dad's beer. He was a beer drinker on accident. And thinking, this is what you lost everything over? This is terrible. Why would you drink this? It's awful. And so I grew up in my mother's home, and she didn't have alcohol, really. Not until I was about in junior high. She was very opposed to it. Didn't want it in the house, and rightfully so. She'd been, traumatized by alcoholism. And my father was not a mean drunk. He was the drunk that you wanted to have at the party. He was fun, he was lively, he told lots of jokes, he got along with everybody. All he wanted to do was sit on the back porch and drink and chain smoke and visit. That's all he wanted to do, just chat with you. And so on through the years, I stayed away from it until I was about 14. I held on as long as I possibly could, and finally had a drink at 14. I needed a drink at about 7, but no one was willing to give it to me. My mother was very strict, and so I didn't drink until I was 14. And always knowing that there was something off, something just a little unsettled. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I didn't feel that way when I got a drink in my system. And I hear a lot of people talk about the magic that happened the very first time they drank. And I will never forget the sensation of what happened when the liquor hit the back of my throat. And all the warmth spread through my body, and suddenly everything made sense. It didn't matter who I was standing with, who I was talking to, what was going on, what nonsense was happening in my external life. Everything made sense. And I vowed to do that as often as I could without consequence, which is how I like to drink. It's not ever how it pans out, but that's how I like to drink. And so I went through junior high with afternoon drinks, which I don't know what was so stressful about the 7th grade that I really needed to, have a couple cocktails after junior high. But we went on that way. And my mom sent me to a private Christian school because she could see that I was already starting to detour at a young age. And so she wanted to give me the best possible opportunity. She's always put every resource at my fingertip, and I have always not taken advantage and destroyed everything that's been put in my path, and complained about it the entire time. Just the most ungrateful child. And so she sent me to this private Christian school, and all the people there were just naturally happy. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was so obnoxious. I just did not understand what they were all so chipper about, and they all talked about God, and you could tell it wasn't an act. When I did, it was an act, and it was, I'm certain, fairly obvious to everyone around me, because you have a smile that doesn't quite reach your eyes. You've got a tone in your voice that isn't quite genuine. And these people were just happy. It was kind of like the first time I came to AA and decided y'all were all weirdos because you were all so happy. I couldn't stand it, but that's neither here nor there. So I go on throughout high school drinking and doing some outside issues, and then I decided about the 11th grade that I was 16, 17, that I really was going to give this God thing a shot. I was going to genuinely try. And I stopped with the drinking, I stopped with everything, and I went to every single course that they taught. I had my Bible with me everywhere. I went to early morning chapels. I went to early morning Bible studies. I went to church. I ran around with the winners. I mean, I tried everything that I could, and at the end of the day, I couldn't get what they had. It was the oddest thing I had ever seen. I knew the same scriptures they did. I sat in the same classes. We all had the same friends. We were together constantly. Why couldn't I catch it? I was waiting for it to rub off on me like osmosis. I'm like, I would pick up their language. I would say, and I would later do this in AA. I would say things like, well, agnosticism, it just really means without knowledge. I didn't know what the hell we were talking about. But if you'd asked me, Audrey, without knowledge of what, I would have went, I don't know. I learned to do this very early on. I was a chameleon. I could be anything that I needed to be in order to be okay. And so I did as much as I could do, and when it got to be too much, I returned to doing what I know works. And sort of a pattern in my life is that when things don't pan out well, I change everything externally. I change my location. I change my people. I can change anything. I changed the degree course I was studying. I've majored in everything but karate in college. It's just, my parents were so sick of me by the time I graduated. It took me 8 years to get a bachelor's. It should take me 4. I don't have a doctorate, but I've been in school for 8 years. Just wasting time. But so I moved out of state. I changed schools. I did all these things. I was going to hang with the winners again. That's always my plan, is to run with you people and hope that it's somehow you rub it off on me or something. And it never worked out that way. So I began to draw further and further into myself, and I've I've been somebody that can be alone since I was a very small child. And my mom used to tease me about it. She still kind of does, about how odd I was. And that I would always play by myself, and I didn't like to be interrupted. She would come into my room and she'd open the door, and I said, "What do you need?" And she's like, "You're 7. I can come in your room if I please, to see what you're doing. Leave the door open." You know, if she didn't wake up early enough, I was out the back door in the woods playing by myself. I was always so self-sufficient because connections with other people did not come easily. It just didn't. And oddly enough, people liked me. I don't know why, but they did. They were drawn to me. People have always been drawn to me, and I couldn't push back with a harder force to get them to leave me alone. It was the strangest thing. And so, you know, connections didn't come easier, and so I began to draw further and further into self. I sought a lot of therapy because I just knew that my parents' divorce was causing me so many problems. They divorced when I was 6, but I just knew that it was like the root of all my unhappiness. I remember I got arrested one time, and the police officer said, "Why are you so drunk?" And I said, "Well, my parents are divorced, you understand?" Like this whole story. And it's like 20 years later. You know, I was so gravely affected by that. Because I always needed something. I needed to be about something. I would take things that happened even close to me or near me and make them about me. I remember my mother said to me one time, she said, "Audrey, you didn't get divorced. You didn't lose the love of your life. You didn't watch your husband kill himself around alcoholism. You didn't do this." And I thought, well, I've been gravely affected. My therapist says so. Oh God. It's like nauseating to think about the level of self-centeredness. It never once dawned on me that my mother was the one who suffered. That my father's heart was broken. It was always, well, nobody thought about me. And then each of them remarried. Each had another child, and then I became just the child from the first marriage, just shuffled back and forth in between the houses. No one loved me. The fact was, they both adore me, right? And they equally wanted to spend time with me. And my half-sisters loved me. My step-parents loved me. Those are the facts. The feeling was I was unwanted. And I'm so delusional in my alcoholism, even at 8 years old, I can't see the true from the false. And my mind tells me what you're thinking. That's real scary. I always thought I knew what everyone was thinking. To this day, I catch myself going, "Oh, Thomas is looking at me funny. I know what he's thinking right now. He's thinking I'm talking to him." Thomas is not even looking at me, right? He's not even looking at me. He's looking past me. He's looking at the clock. He's squinting because he needs to see the clock, but I'm thinking he's making a face at me. He's saying all kinds of things in his head. He's not saying anything. But that self-centeredness is a constant struggle. It's a constant character defect. Thank God we have a program. I went on and on through high school and college, continuing to think that I was so different and I needed, like Margareta, to be treated special because I had emotional issues. I suffer from severe anxiety. I have depression. I have weight and health problems. And, I come from a broken home. And, broken home, please. My parents adored me. They would, both of them slap me if they heard me say this from the podium. I came from a broken home. My mother, namely. But I really didn't return to alcohol until my late teens, and it became such an issue that I quit school. And so when I was reading in the big book, it said the alcoholic leads a double life. I understand that. It wasn't that I slightly exaggerated things. It's that I made up whole stories, whole personifications. I used to tell my college professors I had mono. That's why I can't be in class. I have mono. Feel sorry for me. I have mono. Then in sobriety, I freaking got mono, right? Because that's how that works. And then I had to go back and make amends to that professor I lied to. You talk about feeling like an idiot. She's like, "You did what?" I lied about having mono, and now I have mono. She was a treat, though. I have gone to make amends to so many people that have gone, "That's odd. Okay." It's just, you feel so dumb. But I tell you what, my head hits the pillow at night and there's nothing between me and God. So if I have to set aside my ego to make some amends, that's what we're going to do. So I quickly learned that I only needed to drink with certain people. Because some of the moderate drinkers and even some of the heavy drinkers, they don't tolerate you drinking alcoholically for very long. And I drank daily. And I don't know anything about drinking slowly. I would drink a case of beer before we even went to the bar. And if you're not really one of us, that's strange. They just, do you need another one? Why are you even asking that question? And so some people they had to be removed. Because they just, it's a lot of effort. It really is. I had really reconnected with a lot of my friends from this private Christian school in college, and when I came back to Dallas, and I'd really tried to connect with them, and then I soon discovered that they couldn't be a part of that world. I would try to have some of them over for dinner because these were close connections that I had with these people. We had been friends since junior high, and they loved me dearly. And they would come over for dinner, and invariably somebody in your circle would show up. They would have done too much cocaine. They'd show up on your front doorstep, and you're meeting with your Jesus people. You can't meet with your Jesus people when somebody's high on your front doorstep. That's a problem. Your circles start to mix. You have to separate them further. And so I just had to do away with one whole circle altogether. And, it was just for everyone's best interest. So it was a lot to keep up with. And so we did away with all those people. And the people in my social circle, I lived with a couple of guys who had moved into my house. And what was great about them is that they partied a lot. They weren't alcoholics. They didn't drink constantly, but they partied hard. So what I was doing didn't look too terrible to them. And when you surround yourself with a bunch of grown men who drink, you can very easily, as a girl, blend into that. And so I did that for a long time, and it became necessary for me to stop going in public because I drank quickly and I drank a lot. And I was having the bartenders ask me, have you tried to stop? Now it makes me think he's read the big book. He would say, have you stopped drinking for 1 year? Have you tried that test to see if maybe you have a problem? And I'm thinking, buddy, I'm paying your mortgage. Are you asking me if I have quit for a year? Mosey on. And on and on, and the consequences began to pile up, and all the while, my dad had spent 7 years dry in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and not working the steps, didn't have a sponsor, but he was in those meetings sharing weekly, which we laugh about now. I say, what did you say? He's like, God only knows what I was saying. I don't know. This before I worked the steps, I was probably talking crazy. I'm sure he was. But he was 7 years dry at the time, and I have to stop going in public, and I have to stop being around people, and I've got a list of things to do that my probation officer's given me, and it's just dreary. And so he and I start drinking together. And the level of self-centeredness that I have is that this man has flatlined at times. They've shocked him back to life. He's been told by the ER nurses, don't ever come back in here again. Dying of alcoholism. Do you think I took any of that into consideration when he and I began to drink? Absolutely not. That's how sick I am. That's how sick I am. And that's the reality about who I am at my core. I'm clear on my defects today. We laugh about a lot of this stuff because we've recovered and it's funny. And God knows if we don't have a sense of humor, we're in for a long life. We just are. And we've gone through so much that we can laugh at these things. But I got to tell you that there's a real part of my heart that is just, it makes me sad to think that I was that ill, that I didn't have any more love in my heart for him. But the reality is alcohol is who I served, not him. I couldn't even serve myself. I was subservient to booze, period. And so he and I began to drink together, so you can imagine how well that went over with my stepmother, because she's, been hanging on for dear life, like the family members do, like, please, God, don't drink today. And it was like that for 7 years, because he was unpleasant, dry in the fellowship. And then he and I began to drink together. So she, of course, is furious with me. So we began to sneak around and do that kind of stuff. And I remember the second time, which was only been arrested twice, the second time I went to jail and I called my mother, and she said, I just really feel like we need to call your dad. He is an alcoholic, and, he needs to take some responsibility. And I immediately jump on that bandwagon. I'm like, he does need to take some responsibility for this, because he should have probably been a better parent. I got to tell you, nobody has ever held my heart like my father. Adored this man. But given the chance, I'll throw you under the bus if it means saving me a drink. That's the truth. It's the truth. And if I think that you're going to take the drink away from me, it doesn't matter what the cost is, I'm willing to pay it. It's sick, but it's true. I'd have done anything. I would have knocked you over. You could be an old lady with a cane. I will kick it out from under you to get a next drink. This is the truth about who I am. Right? And I remember growing up with this man, and he said, your stepmother asking me not to drink is like her asking me not to breathe. And I thought, that's so dramatic. Until I crossed the line in my own alcoholism and went, I could no more put down a drink than I could hold my breath. It was that desperate. So he and I went on through the years doing what we do, and the last time that he was called into the hospital, he flatlined and they care flighted him out, and his liver, everything was failing, his internal organs, and they shocked him back, and I went to visit him in the hospital, and my delusion was, if I ever got as bad as him, I'd quit. The reality is I was coming up right behind him and too delusional to see it. I just couldn't. And everybody around me could see it. You know what's bad when your family members are trying to coax you in, and your counselor's trying to coax you in, and your probation officer says you need a big book and a sponsor. And I'm like, how do I wind up with a probation officer that's in AA? I mean, it's like God is saying, hello, wake up. But I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get one of those big books. I'm on that. And I went to AA, and then I very quickly figured out you can sign your own paper, so there's no need to go to AA. In the States, we have to take little pieces of paper and have the chairperson sign off on. It's not really a good system because you can sign your own paper. So once I figured that out, I stopped attending AA because I didn't feel like I needed it. But I did go to a couple meetings that were court-ordered, and y'all were very happy, and you hugged a lot, and you picked up poker chips. I wasn't certain what that was about, but it looked interesting. But once I figured out I didn't have to be there, I didn't want to be there, because I wasn't done. I absolutely wasn't done. So by the time it got time for me to get done, it was, quite some time, but I went home to do an intervention on my father. Right. Because that's how arrogant I am. My stepmom called me and said, your dad is, getting out of the hospital, and they say if he ever drinks again, you know the drill. And I had been lying, of course, about the fact that I was supposedly sober at that point. And I said, well, what do we need to do? She said, I need you to come home. We're going to meet with the pastor, because that's who we need to involve in this. We'll get the pastor, and then you and I will sit down and have an intervention with him. And I thought, well, okay. And so I go home, and he's loaded, of course. By the time he hits the door, he's loaded. And I was at the point where I couldn't go a day without it, and it had been like that for quite some time. Booze coming out of my pores constantly. No school. I quit my job. All my friends had gone, even my drinking friends. It's bad when your drinking buddies do an intervention on you. I was really offended. I have to tell you, I was really pissed when they did. I thought, you're at the bar with me, you're going to do an intervention on me? Are you serious? I was so mad. But they were right. I drank differently. I did. And so I go home to do this intervention on my father, and I go back to his bedroom, and he's standing in front of the mirror, and he's talking to himself. Which there's nothing sadder than that desperate loneliness that you talk to yourself in the mirror, and he's swaying back and forth. And I just thought, the fear is not that the booze will kill me soon. That's the hope. The hope is I drink myself to death within the next 6 months to a year. The fear is I could make it to be his age, and this could be my child watching me in the mirror. Likely, the way I was going, I wouldn't have gotten married and had children anyway, but the point is I could have lived another 25 or 30 years drinking myself into oblivion day in and day out, and I would rather die. I got to the point, the Vision for You talks about the jumping off point. I couldn't live with it, and I couldn't live without it. I did not want to live this way, but the thought of never having a drink again made me physically shake. It terrified me. And so I went and I called my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm an alcoholic and I need some help. And as soon as I said it, I thought, oh crap. right? And I'm trying to like reel it back in, and she's like, too late. She's on it. She's calling the lawyer. She's calling the probation officer. We're figuring out a treatment program, and it was like off, done. And so I went back to Denton, and she said, I just need you to stay sober and come back to my house, and we'll get you to treatment. So I immediately got loaded. And so I show up at her house, and she drives me down to South Texas to a treatment center, and I didn't know that you could show up to treatment loaded. Did y'all know that? I didn't know that. So I detoxed on the way down there with my mother. My mother is like a perpetually happy person. She's just happy and gracious and all is well, and can I do anything for you? And I'm like, oh, God. With the talking, I mean, I'm just such an ungrateful little brat. But the woman is driving me 6-8 hours to treatment and trying to cheer me up, right? Because, I mean, my life has ended. I'm 22. And I'm at the point where I want to die. And she's just trying to be positive. God love her heart. And I want to punch her in the throat, And so she drops me off at treatment. And she would later tell me that when she dropped me off, she told the nurse, now, this one is a sensitive one. So, which I thought was interesting. She said the intake nurse told her, oh, honey, they all are. So, mosey on, drop her off, leave her bags, she's fine. And I very quickly was introduced to sensitive one. My sponsor still makes fun of that. She says she thinks about me when she reads in the big book that it takes some of us a long time to overcome this serious handicap. I didn't realize it was a handicap. I thought being sensitive, like that's precious. To be sensitive, she said, no, compassion is precious. Sensitive is self-centered. I was like, I was confused about that. Anyway, so I get dropped off at this treatment center, and I'm like actually kind of looking forward to getting on a treadmill, eating food, which I hadn't done in a while, showering, which also was not high on my list, sleeping at a normal schedule, which I didn't know anything about, and just being like a normal person. And I thought, we'll have some classes, maybe we'll like meditate, I'll make some friends, because I don't like people, let me see if I can connect with people or something. And it was not at all like that, at all. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, they wanted you to get up and they wanted you to sit in this class called Big Book. And again, I'm like, oh my God, with this big book, what is this? It must be like one of those giant Bibles you see in a pulpit, and you're like, ooh, like newspaper size. And no, at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's that damn Chris with that little tiny book, waving it around, foaming at the mouth, being crazy. And I was like, oh God, I have to sit on the back row, like it's too much for 8 a.m. And he was crazy. And as the days went on, I moved up. I moved up rows, and I was like, I might be interested in what he's talking about. Because he started to speak about the disease of alcoholism from a physical and mental and emotional standpoint where I identified, and he wasn't talking at me. He was talking about him, which I love. Like, he understood the big book completely. So he could speak about it from his own experience, and I identified. He wasn't getting on to me. He wasn't judging me. He said, this is me and this is the big book. By the end of it, I'm on the front row. I'm highlighting things. I don't even know half of what we're talking about, but I'm so excited about the possibility that I could have a life. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could get something good, right? Because in my idea, when you stop drinking, life got real crappy real fast. Mm-hmm. Never in my life have I been more discontent than sober without a solution. Mm-hmm. I don't know how people do it. So it gets me kind of fired up about the big book stuff, and they give me a name of a woman named Julie in Dallas. And they said, when you get back to Dallas, you call this lady and you get her to be your sponsor. And I was like, okay, I'm like hooked up. I'm excited. And so we get there, and I lived in a house that my grandfather owned. He sells it. He says, you can live with your mother, you can live with me. I said, I'll live with you. My mom's a real chipper. I'm not going to be up for that. So I go and move in with him, and I start going to these AA meetings in Dallas. And I hear this woman in a meeting, and I think, she's something else. And she was wound up, just like Chris. And then I heard her addressing somebody else about something they were doing that they weren't supposed to be doing. And I was like, I don't know about her. And then she said, my name is Julie. And I was like, ooh, for sure know that woman cannot sponsor me, because when I got into the rooms of AA, I had gone without human interaction for quite some time. I had gone without speaking to people. I had gone without physical touching people. I never saw anybody. The only person that saw me was the guy who worked at the drive-through beer store. Do they have those here? It is delightful. You don't even have to get out of your car. It's awesome. So you drive through and they'll set the case of beer up there, or the liquor, and it's like going through a drive-through fast food place, but only they give you alcohol and cigarettes. It's amazing. I mean, the only thing better would be if it was on wheels and it came to your house and they delivered it. That could be the only thing that would ever be better than that. Why we haven't started that business, I don't know. We would make a ton of money. Anyway, and so I had gotten real bizarre. I didn't live with lights on for a long time, and it's not because the light bill wasn't paid. It was that I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to see myself. And so I lived in the dark for a long time. So I was, you get me. And so I was weird, to say the least. I'm still weird, but in a much different way. And I had forgotten a lot of this until somebody was reminding me that I wore a baseball cap, and I would pull it down so that I didn't make eye contact with you, and God forbid you make eye contact with me. If you even looked at me, I would shatter. I was that fragile emotionally that I could barely be in my own skin. And so, and don't talk to me, and for the love of God, don't hug me. I sat in the back and on the corner and just kind of wanted to ease my way in. And after getting excited about recovery and treatment and starting to go to some of these meetings where they're talking about the big book, I slowly got the idea that maybe I really can do this. Because it's something when you're in treatment and you get excited, but then the little shell breaks when you re-enter the real world. Yeah. I went out to dinner with my family the night that I got home, and the restaurant got really loud, and I started to panic because I'm not used to being in a social setting when I'm not loaded. Or really at all. But to cope with anything, I didn't know how to do. The phone would ring and I'm like, I don't want to answer. I don't want to be a part of anything. And so I started going to these meetings in Dallas, and slowly but surely got on board with the idea that possibly I really could do this. And Julie took me through the work one night because I spent a short period of time in AA trying to do my version of the program. Anyone else do that? Okay. Where I was like, you don't really need to know that on my 4-step kind of a thing. And I'm not going to make those couple of amends. And I don't have time to go to the treatment center because it's my uncle's birthday. I have to attend that party. I mean, why would I be going to his party? But it's just constant nonsense. And so that went on for a few months, and I got to the point, I'm not somebody that can do irritable, restless, and discontent for an extended period of time. I get crazy real quick. And so a few months into my sobriety, I'm trying to decide if I should drink and go to AA or just drink and go away. Because now I've told people. That's a problem. When you start telling people you're in AA, right? And then you decide, I might want to drink. And it's like, oh, crap, what am I going to do with all these people? I'm living with some of them that they know I'm in recovery. And so I was crazy. And I showed up on Julie's doorstep one night. And she was meeting with somebody she sponsored. And I sat with them. And she was talking to this woman about the power of God, and this woman was telling her experiences about the power of God. And I said, oh my, that's what I want. That's what I want. She said, go get your big book. I'm your sponsor now. Don't come back in this house without it ever again. And I'm like scurrying to the car. It's like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. The woman's married and she's got 4 kids. She takes me all the way through the 3rd step. Takes her a couple hours. Takes me through the 3rd step that night. Gives me 4-step paperwork. 2 days later, I'm asking her, when are we meeting? I'm not waiting on her to tell me. I'm already beginning to have the experience that I hear that the rest of you have already had. Right? I'm chasing her down to do a 5th step. I sat down with her, and for the very first time saw in black and white just how sick I've been. And how wrong I've been. I spent my whole life being right and justified. I grew up with people telling me, you have a chip on your shoulder. I had no idea what that meant until I started to read the big book, and I saw words like indignant. And went, ooh, that's what they meant. I think you owe me something. For what? Just because. Right? Just, God, self-centered. And so she began to talk to me about my character defects, and I saw things that I had never seen. And the role of the martyr and the victim began to slip away. And there's nothing more freeing than that. Nothing. I got alone with God and did 6 and 7 and got ready to do this, really do this, not play with it. It was going to be my sobriety or I was going to walk. Because I don't do that in between fence riding crap very well. I'm too crazy for that. I got busy making amends, and I made some awkward amends. There's nothing more interesting than an awkward amends. And you're like, oh, the rhythm is like, it's not, what's happening? It's like people that don't understand phone etiquette, and you don't know, like, are we done with the conversation, or like, do I hang up? My stepdad's like that. I'm like, hello, are we still talking? I don't understand. It's so weird. He's so weird. I love him. I made an amends to him, and this is a man that I had horribly, horribly treated, and just punished him for not being my father. Was angry about my parents' divorce, took it out on my stepfather, and he took every bit of it. This is a man that would watch me as the police were watching me speed out of a bar loaded with people in my car. A man whose finances I destroyed, whose trust I destroyed, and I was just generally hateful to him. So I went to make amends to him and sat before him and just was crying because he's such a good person. And I really saw the depth in which I had harmed him and mistreated him and didn't deserve one bit of it. And so I was upset, and I was telling him, I regret the way that I've treated you, and I see that I've done the following things, and what can I do to make it right? And I'm just like waiting for like the hammer to drop, because I would have deserved it. And he said, you know what? When you come to my house, stop taking the captioning off my TV. That really annoys me. Like I had to go like, what? I mean, I'm like snot, like it's hysterical crying. And he's like, don't do that anymore. It annoys me. I mean, 10 years later, I don't touch the man's remote. I don't touch it. Because that's all he wanted. It was the funniest thing. He's to this day one of my closest buddies. Closest buddies. I made amends to my grandfather, who I'm pretty notorious for taking advantage of people financially. And I very much did so with him, and I was very disrespectful and was not the kind of granddaughter that you would ever want to have. And I made amends to him, and I was fully expecting you know what, honey, I love you, and you're sober, and I'm so grateful, and you just keep doing what you're doing. I was full on expecting that. Oh no, that fool had a list of things I needed to be doing. He said, you can be where you say you're going to be. You can pay your bills on time. You can show up early. You can be, and he just all the way down the list, immediate resentment. I'm like, you're just supposed to love me. What are you doing? What is that? And then I could see I had an expectation, so I was wrong in my amends. And I just have had some very interesting amends. I have had teachers, professors that I have terrorized, that I've gone back to make amends to. Made amends to all my family, tons of friends, acquaintances. And it's been an amazing experience. And I can tell I've made too many amends to one of my sisters. Have you ever had to make an amends for an amends? Anybody ever done that? That's a whooping, right? Because you go in and then you try to justify what you did. I will never make that mistake again. And I always advise people I sponsor, don't ever go in with a motive. Don't ever go in with an explanation. You're just wrong. That's it. I'm wrong, what can I do? I'm wrong, what can I do? Practice, say it with me. Wrong, what can I do? Right? I'm going to tell her, I said this because you said that, and I felt this, and then I thought you were feeling it. I'm having a full-on process group, like we're in therapy with this lady, and I'm like, what am I doing? She said, aren't you supposed to ask me what you can do to make it right? And I thought, I've made too many amends to you, obviously, because you already know the drill and I'm messing it up. But I've rectified things with my family, and to this day, they trust me, and they can see that there's a difference in me. My mom told me one night on a family vacation, we were down on the beach just kind of hanging out, and she said, Audrey, I was probably 25 at the time, she said, I want what you have. And I thought, really? Because I'm a disaster. I hadn't grown into the idea of how powerful God was. I'm so self-centered, I can't see my own growth. I can't even see what all he can do. All I know is I'm not loaded today and I'm helping others. That's all I know. But the people around me are going, how are you doing that? How are you? Because they saw me, right? Just ridiculousness. And the pain that I don't know what people experience when they're dying. I don't know what people experience that have other diseases. I can only imagine that it's horrible. And I won't venture to guess, but the depths of alcoholism, being backed into the corner and knowing that the bottle owns you day in and day out, week after year. I don't know much more desperation, much more pain than that. And having to explain and trying to come up with reasons because you don't know. I never sat on a bar stool and went, man, I hate that I'm suffering from this physical allergy and this mental obsession. It's a beating. I mean, I didn't know. I said, I hate that I'm a bad person. I hate that I don't care about anybody, including myself. I didn't know any of this stuff. And today I get to know it and I get to help other women with it. And my life has been immeasurably changed. I wouldn't go back even if I could. And they taught me how to continue, right? I made amends, and I've made every amend that I know to make. Should any more come to my attention and be erased within my spirit, I'm willing to make them. I've got one in particular that I've got to hold on to, right? I hold myself in willingness to do it, but until that person, right, finds out, I can't do it because I can't harm the other person. So I get to live with that. And that's a gift that I get to live with it, that I don't harm somebody else. They taught me how to do a 10-step and how to do it consistently. I was obsessed with the 10-step when I first got sober. I thought Julie was going to start screening my phone calls at one point. Where I was like, okay, I had this one bad thought. What do you think? And she's like, I think you're human, bye. You know, but I was obsessed because I had been such a bad person prior that I thought I had to come into AA and get perfect and walk on water. And Cliff, nobody irritates me and loves me more than Cliff. And he would call me and say, Audrey, you're not going to walk on water today. And I was like, well, I might. If I do enough 10 steps, I could maybe get this. And he said, no, kiddo, it's hell having to be human when you want to walk on water. Click. And I'm like, and what do you say to that anyway? There's nothing to say. That's what he does. He just drops bombs on your face and then walks away. But I was grateful, I wasn't grateful in the moment. I can't say that I'm grateful today for the men and women that have sat me down and taught me the lessons about Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't just say, read the book and best of luck. They said, come with us, ride with us, go with us, talk with us. They involved me. My sponsor had me out there greeting people. I don't like people. I was like, let's not let this be the face of AA when people show up and I'm like, hi. My freaking sponsors make me stand up and say hi to you. Just crazy. I'm like, where can I hide for 20 minutes that I don't have to talk to these people and I can go back and sit in the corner? They showed me how to be AA. They taught me how to pray and meditate. And I got to tell you, I've had some people in my world that I'm very fortunate to have that imparted a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience to me, but never have I been more schooled than in the quietness of the power of God. You want to get schooled in some things, you want to get some things resonated in your spirit, get quiet with God. I'm a big fan of prayer. I love to talk to God. But there's something about the stillness. Does he always speak to me in the stillness? No, not necessarily. But it opens the channel so that when the answer is needed, it's there. And I hear people say all the time, well, how do you know? You know. Did I know initially? No. I had to mess with it, and I had to bump my head a couple times. I had to have my sponsor go, no, to what you're saying, just no. But you learn, and the big book tells me that I will absolutely come to rely upon it. Yeah. I'm crystal clear today about relationships, careers, family members, people that I should and shouldn't be friends with, situations I can and can't place myself in, my recovery. All of it because I have a heightened sense of awareness because I'm connected to God. It's not because I'm brilliant or I've been sober a long time. I haven't. I'm neither of those things, I can assure you. But there's a connection. And I can't give away what I don't have. Right? Which is why I consistently do a 10-step. Because if I don't do 10, 11's ineffective, and then what the hell am I doing in 12? Make sense? It's a circle. It always is. The steps, we talked about a spiritual momentum yesterday, I think it was, that it continues to build. And the 10, 11, and 12 will just stay just as rapid as you'll let it be. Right? That's where the good stuff is. So I would encourage you to continue. And we're going to go through some weird times in sobriety. Lord knows most of us have. And ask Peter and ask Thomas, they've been around long enough. You go through weird stuff in sobriety, and it's okay. It's all right. You come out the other side of it, right? But it's a process of growing up. And I used to hear people say that, getting sober is like growing up in public. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Until it started to happen, and I was like, so comfortable. And you now know that everybody sees it, right? When you're going through it, I didn't know that you knew, right? I didn't know that. Now I do, and I'm like, it's embarrassing. But it's good for my ego, because it needs to get smacked down. Because I start to think, I know some things. I've been around for a minute. I have some of this stuff. No, you don't. You're drunk. Right? We're on the same playing field. And I have to get reminded of that kind of stuff. But I'm fortunate enough to have worked a program that was simple. Right? The utter simplicity is the gift of this program. You cannot be too dumb to get this. But you can be too arrogant to get it. For sure. For sure. This has been an absolute blast. We have loved every minute of this, and just thank you guys so much, not only for your hospitality, but the invitation to even come and do this. It's been a real treat. We really, really appreciate you guys. Love y'all.
I'm Henrik, I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you.
Fantastic. That was just about it. Thank you all so much for coming. A lot of thanks to all the people who made it possible today. They've done some hard work. And I suggest we don't leave them with the rest of the hard work, but that we all give a hand and we can be finished quite soon, I think. Thank you ever so much, and today I suggest that we end with the Serenity Prayer. How about that? Thank you. God grant me